So hello, everybody. Welcome. If you've come for the Talks with Gurus, you're at the right spot. Uh, my name is Christina, and I'm here with a fellow board member of the Whistler Naturalist, Bob, and we'll be your hosts tonight. The Naturalists are a volunteer group here in Whistler that we love learning about nature and sharing our nature knowledge with others. The Talks with Gurus is part of our 19th annual Fungus Among Us. So I can't believe it, it's been so long. So Fungus Among Us, like many of our naturalist events, we have two main components. We have public events that focus on education, and we also have research. So we're so happy to be able to offer some limited in-person events this year. After last year, COVID, we didn't have any. And this year it started with presentations to our local schools between Spring Creek Community School, Myrtle Phillip, and École Passerelle. We had outdoor talks and walks to 22 classes. That's over 500 kids. And it was just so great to see them so excited in the woods. And it didn't even matter if it was raining. So I wanted to thank all the teachers and kids that made that possible. Tonight we have a lineup we hope you'll enjoy. We'll have MacKinnon and Kem Luther talk about their new guidebook, Mushrooms of BC. We'll also have Thom O'Dell talk about mushrooms and mental health. And then the winners of the Fantastic Fungi Photo Contest, which are amazing, by Joern Rohde and Andy Dietrich. And just to let you know that if you have questions during the talk, you can put them in the comment section, and then one of us hosting will try and get to as many questions as we can. Oh, and I forgot to mention Sabrina's in the background, keeping us all organized and making everything happen. So this talk was advertised as pay what you can, knowing that COVID has hit some more than others. So for those of you who were able to pay something and who did, we'd like to say a big thank you. And at the end of the talks tonight, we're going to do a prize draw for Andy and Kem's new book. So if you haven't paid as you could yet, and you want to be in that prize draw, you can still pay as you can during the talks, and Sabrina will add your name to the draw. So I'll just put that out there, and you can we'll announce the name at the end. So tomorrow morning is Walks with Gurus, which we sold out of so quickly. I mean, Whistler really loves its mushrooms. If you're joining us tomorrow, get to Myrtle Phillip no later than 8:30 in the morning. Please remember to dress really warm. Bring your proof of double vaccination and your ticket. And in the morning, we'll divvy up into smaller groups that will go to different locations. So you'll get that information in the morning, and then we'll go from there. Tomorrow also, from 2:30 till 4, we're bringing back our mushroom display, but it'll be outdoors this year at Myrtle Phillip under some tents. So if you missed the walk but you're really into mushrooms, please come join us then. Just note that we do also require double vaccination for that. And it's also as a pay what you can. So please come. We'd also like to thank our funders and supporters that we couldn't run this event without. Whistler Community Foundation and our charitable partner Aware is always our biggest supporter. Thank you so much. Also the RMOW, Nestor's Market has been there right from the beginning, the Whistler Bike Co., and other community organizations who came through with tents for our display that I haven't already mentioned include the Whistler Museum, Whistler Library, Creekside Market, and the Sea to Sky Invasive Species Council. I love how everybody comes together for events like these. So I'm now going to pass off to Bob Brett, who is also the Naturalists founding president and the visionary and lead biologist behind the Whistler Biodiversity Project, to talk a bit about the research side of Fungus Among Us and to introduce our first speakers.
Hi, everyone. Whoa. I hope I'm not as blurry as I seem to be, but oh well. So I'm very excited to present our speakers tonight. they've been, all three of them have been very pivotal in making sure that we know more and more about our fungi and other species in Whistler. So, we have approximately 900 different species of fungi on the Whistler list. There's many, many more to find. And each year we add about 20 new species. One of the things we're trying to do is to add a little stronger scientific component. Just something to watch out for next year is that we will have some workshops, so that if you want to get more deeply into mushroom science, it'll give you that opportunity. It's a very exciting time in mushroom history because of DNA. Many new species are being identified. The species that were originally named from European species, especially through DNA analysis, have been found to be the ones around here of the Pacific Northwest are often different. And so if you feel like the scientific names keep changing, you're absolutely right. It's a little confusing, but let's just call it exciting. So the exciting part for me tonight is the Kem Luther and Andy MacKinnon's new book, which we'll talk about tonight, Mushrooms of BC. So Armchair Books does have them, a very limited amount of them, just because the first print run is pretty much sold out. But please contact them if you want to get on the wait list. And some lucky people tomorrow, if you get there quickly and talk to Andy and Kem, they do have a few that for sale at the event. So just a quick introduction of Andy and Kem. Andy is one of the first scientist gurus that joined us with Fungus Among Us. Our first event was 2003 with two leaders, and I think he joined in 2004 and has been here pretty much every year since. A really key part of our event, and we thank him for that. He and Kem are both co-founders of the Machosen Biodiversity Project, both served on the executive of the Southern Vancouver Island Mycological Society, and they travel extensively this time of year to many different communities to their mushroom festivals. Andy is his main research interest lately has been the ecology of BC's ectomycorrhizal fungi, and he was actually the lead BC scientist for Environment Canada's 2017 ranking of the province's threatened and endangered fungi. You probably know him best from his excellent book with Jim Pojar on the plants of the Pacific Northwest, and he's also co-authored another 5 books. Kem Luther is coincidentally also the author of another 6 books besides the one he's presenting tonight. He's a naturalist and obviously a writer, originally from the Nebraska Sandhills, which apparently don't look all that much like our forests, and it's taught at various universities, including the U of T and New York. So tonight we're very excited to hear them introduce their just off the press book, Mushrooms of BC. If you have questions, please add them to the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and we'll ask as many of your questions as time allows. Welcome, Andy and Kem.
Thanks so much, Bob.
Yeah, the Sandhills, by the way, are exactly like BC, except no trees and no water.
Okay. So welcome everybody to Fungus Among Us. Tonight's presentation will go back and forth between Kem and me. We hope the presentation will be about 40 minutes with 5 minutes or a bit longer for questions at the end, and maybe there will be more time for discussion afterwards. All kinds of exciting events, and Kem and I will both be among the troops leading walks tomorrow morning, so we hope you can join us then. Tonight, we're going to introduce BC's new mushroom book, Mushrooms of British Columbia. I'll come back to this at the end of the talk, but it's got our 2 names on the cover, but there are many, many people that are involved in putting a book like this together. Some of them members of our Mycological Society, some of them here at Fungus Among Us. So this guide was the third mushroom guide published by the Royal British Columbia Museum to mushrooms of British Columbia. The first, published in 1946, was written by Joern Rohde with fabulous illustrations by Frank Beebe. It was a small guide of about 90 pages with about 50 species of mushrooms in it. This was followed up by the Guide to Common Mushrooms of British Columbia by Robert Bandoni and Adam Shavinsky, first published in 1964 and last revised in 1976, which I believe was the first Royal BC Museum handbook to feature color photographs. It was about 170 pages long and contained about 150 mushrooms. And Robert Bandoni, coincidentally, was my master's supervisor at UBC when I did my master's in mycology, studying an obscure group of microscopic fungi in streams in 1982. The new guide, by contrast, has 500 pages, includes 350 mushroom species as main entries, and another 800 or so species that we mention under the main entries. So in tonight's talk, we're going to talk about how the book was put together. Then we're going to take a break and look at a bunch of beautiful photographs of gill and veined mushrooms, a little bit of eye candy to just sit back and enjoy. We'll talk about the box essays and fun facts embedded in the guide, interacting with current research and how that informed our writing of the guide. Then a second series of photographs, this time of the non-gilled fungi, and then a very brief wrap-up.
Okay, so let me talk just a little bit about how this book came to be made. The actual work on the new guide occupied about 4 years, from 2017 to 2021. The concept of the book, though, is much older than this. As early as 1983, Andy and Paul Kroger had drawn up an initial prospectus for the book. In the last 2 decades, almost every discussion of print resources for BC mushrooms has included some kind of lament for the lack of a BC-specific book. Books that are guides to plants, mushrooms, whatever, are much more valuable if they are local. And we just didn't have a BC-specific guide. Bob said there's something wrong with what's out there. Anyway, in 2017, Andy and I found ourselves, we're both writers, we found ourselves looking for new writing projects. And the BC Mushroom Guide at that time popped to the top of the stack. So after a search for a suitable publisher, we just contacted and signed a contract with BC Museum Press. Not only had BC Museum Press published these 2 previous guides that Andy mentioned, it's also well known for its extensive series of BC natural history guides.
So for me, this was particularly exciting because I suspect, like a lot of people who have joined us tonight, I grew up with these guides. They were my introduction to the natural world. So it was very exciting to get an opportunity to contribute to the series.
The first task we had in putting this book together was to come up with a list of what was in the book, right? Your typical outline your 7th grade teacher told you about. We needed a list of mushroom species for the book. Ian Gibson, the developer of MycoMatch, that's him on the left, and Shannon Birch, a mycologist with the Ministry of the Environment and the author of a checklist, Macrofungus Species of BC, along with Paul Kroger, helped us to pull together a master list of all the fungi that had been recorded in BC. Ian, Shannon, and Paul Kroger also helped us to whittle this list down. We started with about 3,400 known species of mushrooms, mushrooms that had been identified in BC. And of course, that's only a fraction of what's probably out there. We think there are thousands and thousands more mushrooms that have never been identified in BC. So to decide which of these 3,400 to include, we assembled a large number of foray and archive lists and checked the frequency with which certain mushrooms occurred.
And of course, that includes the 19 years of species lists from Whistler Fungus Among Us.
Indeed, we had Bob's list right in front of us all the time. And we realized that Andy and I had a bit of a bias. We both live at the southern tip of Vancouver Island, and most of our activity is in southwestern BC. So we ran our list by several mycologists who had specific interests in interior and northern BC species. And they helped us quite a bit to include some species that we might otherwise have missed. We finally whittled the list down to 350 species that we wanted to include as main entries. We prepared sample pages with photographs and descriptions and confirmed with the press that they could accommodate our text and picture requirements. In addition to the pictures and descriptions of the 350 species, we also wanted to put in the book about 24 feature essays on BC mycology. These are sort of backgrounder pieces, and we wanted them specifically to focus on BC. We'd also planned to include identification keys in the book, but we had dropped that, and many beginning books do not have keys, and so we're nothing out of the ordinary there. So we omitted the keys. Once we had this book mapped out, we started to write it, and in the course of generating 150,000 words about BC mushrooms, we consulted 500 journal articles, many books and mushroom guides, and innumerable web pages. To make the book more accessible to beginning users, we gave special attention to vocabulary. Those who participate in research communities know that you have to master large technical vocabularies, but these technical terms can create a high bar for beginners. So what do mushroom newbies make of words like annulus, lacanose, scobiculate, adnate, and fusoid? Wherever possible, we replace technical terms like these with more transparent phrases. As the different sections of the new mushroom book were generated, they were sent out to experts in the various groups for comments and corrections. Several people looked at the entire text, among them Paul Kroger. He not only looked at the text, but all of our pictures. In parallel with the writing task, we began to search for about 400 photos to include in the book. Now, Andy and I are not photographers. We take pictures, but we don't think of ourselves as skilled photographers. But we know many people who are, and so we contacted photographers from all over Western Canada and the US Pacific Northwest, about 100 different photographers, and we received from them 15,000 candidate photos. They were very generous in sharing their photos with us, and picking out the best photo for each species was one of the most difficult tasks of the book. I know it was for me. Mm-hmm. For most of the photos, we sought images that illustrated important features that were highlighted in our descriptions, but a few photos we just selected for their pure beauty. This is a picture, for example, by James Holko of the white marasmius. A fantastic mushroom and a fantastic picture. For some sections of the book, especially the introduction, line drawings were more appropriate than photographs, and Dr. Kara Gibson provided us with a set of about 30 amazing drawings. Finally, in June 2020, we submitted to BC Press our photographs and text. I had my wife come in and take a picture of me hitting the enter key to actually send this away after 4 years of work. But that wasn't the end of it. That just began a long task of book layout, cover design, copy editing, fact checking, proofreading, indexing. A large production team was ably coordinated by Eve Rickert, the editor and publisher at BC Museum Press. And formal publication of the book happened last month. An ebook version is also available. And copies can be ordered if they're available through the museum and other print book outlets. And it is available in bookstores throughout BC.
I'll just add briefly, Kem mentioned as long as it's available, there was an initial press run of 5,000 copies, and they're just about all gone now. Yeah. And they're not going to be able to print more until the end of February at the earliest. So if you have a chance, if you're interested, I'd recommend you move quickly to get a copy. It's rather unexpectedly been on the BC bestseller list in 2nd or 3rd position since it came out, which is kind of an odd place for a mushroom guy to be, I thought. Anyway, so for your viewing pleasure and not much more, if you're at all interested, a whole bunch of photographs here contributed by a wide variety of photographers of gilled and veined mushrooms.
And these are all photographs from the book.
So one major difference, as Kem mentioned, is that the authors didn't take most of these photos. And we'd like to share with you a lot of the beautiful photos, like this photo here from Tyson Ehlers of the woolly inky cap dissolving into black liquid. A couple of pictures that Kem wouldn't allow me to include in the book, and I'm still not sure why. A beautiful Foliota photo by May Called on the left from a willow tree, and Chaga on the right by Kelly MacArthur.
I went through 4 years of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Here's the pig's ear. In each case, we've given the common name, the scientific name, and the photographer by Rich Mabley, a good friend and an exceptional photographer from southern Vancouver Island, just out west of where we live. And as we go through these, imagine how much time these photographers must have spent on their belly in some pretty wet places, getting some of these exceptional images. The woolly mink, a milk cap by Christian Swartz, one of the co-authors of Mushrooms of the Redwood Coast. The photos, wherever possible, are from British Columbia, where there were excellent diagnostic photos from adjacent jurisdictions. We used those. Rich Mabley's terrific photo of the parrot waxy cap, Gliophorus psittacinus. Kem will talk a bit later about name changes. Most of you will probably still be familiar with this as Hygrocebi psittacinus, if you're familiar with the scientific name. A beautiful pair of sheathed powder caps, Cystodermaphalax, again from Tyson Ehlers from the West Kootenays. You can see the remnants of the partial veil in the rings on the stems and also in the decoration around the edges of the caps. Some photos, you can tell just by looking at them that you would get your fingers all gooey from trying to pick up a mushroom like this. Yellow waxy cap. And an even slipperier mushroom that used to be known as Limacella and is now called Zoolangiomyces by Kit Skates Barnhart. A number of this late great mycologist's photos were made available to us by Michael Bugh. Thank you, Michael. The Lilac Guild Umbrella by Sava Kristic, and we have a number of Sava's photos in here. The only photo that was not from British Columbia or adjacent jurisdictions was this photo of the grass green Russula graminia. We didn't have a good photo from BC or adjacent jurisdictions. This one is from Finland, but we have the DNA sequence from this species, and it's identical to similar mushrooms collected in British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest. So we felt a little more comfortable about using this photo. Almost all the photos in the book are of mushrooms straight up. This is the one photo in the book that's of the fungal component of a lichen. This is Lichenomphila umbellifera, and in this case, the fungal partner in a lichen, a partnership between a fungus, one or more fungi, one or more plants, and sometimes cyanobacteria. Sometimes the fungus just decides it's going to reproduce on its own, and that's the case here. The slippery mycena. When you're looking at great photos like this, two things leap out to me. One is you can appreciate, I think, just by looking at the backlit slime, why this is called the slippery mycena. And the other is that this is a beautiful, clear, crisp photo that would not immediately lead you to believe that this was only a few centimeters tall. So we've got a lot of terrific big photos of very small fungi. The Prince, Agaricus augustus, a lot of people's favorite edible mushroom with a beautiful sweet almond smell. Almost start salivating looking at this picture by Richard Morrison, who also took our cover photo. The yellow-gilled Jim. Here's a photographer who's got down below the level of the mushroom so they can shoot the yellow gills on this one. Kaufman's root shank, an old growth associated species photographed by Scott Redhead. The Rosy Gum Phidias from Richard Morrison. Vermilion waxy cap, Hygrocebi miniata. Again, Rich Mabley shot this photo. You can get an idea of how small this mushroom is by looking at the bryophytes, the mosses growing around it. The blue-green Stropharia, photographed by Taylor Lockwood. In addition to the photos, we also included mushroom descriptions, which make up the bulk of any mushroom book. But if all we had was the descriptions and the photos, it would give us an incomplete picture of the use of mushrooms in British Columbia. So we included about 24 essays, mostly 2 pages, some 1 pages in the book, which provide fun cameos of the many meanings and uses of BC mushrooms. Here's a lovely picture of Adam Brett. I think a lot of you may know Adam, meeting his first pine mushroom. That photo's in the book. We have essays on, well, you can see the list there. Magic mushrooms, mycoheterotrophs, fairy rings, the commercial mushroom harvest in BC, medicinal mushrooms, even corpse mushrooms and zombie ants and other horrors if you're looking for something to read as Halloween comes closer. And each of these talks about specific aspects of mushrooms in British Columbia, oftentimes in an integrative fashion that brings together a bunch of different mushrooms from different sections of the book. BC has played, for example, a world-recognized role in popularizing magic mushrooms. And we've got a box essay on magic mushrooms in BC. The first arrest outside of Mexico magic mushrooms for magic mushrooms was in 1965 on the UBC campus, where some students were.
Was that you?
No, that was for possession of Liberty Cap mushrooms. Here's Paul Marcano with Liberty Caps in a farmer's field near the Tawasin Ferry Terminal in 1980. Oh.
Yeah, I think he's been enjoying the mushrooms.
I think so. I think so, yes. Yeah. The essay on medicinal mushrooms discusses the toolkit of the 5,000-year-old Otzi the Iceman, who not only had tinder conchs in his fire-starting kit, but he had 2 birch conchs illustrated here on leather straps with him, and these were almost certainly for medicinal use. The birch conch has been widely used medicinally for millennia.
Either that or he was trying to find Paul Kroger to get him to identify them for him.
Could have been, yeah. Paul's been around for a while. Dyeing fabrics with mushrooms and lichens also has become an important part of the BC mushroom scene. So there's an essay devoted to a discussion of some of the mushrooms used by dyeing artisans. In the box essay, Zombie Ants and Other Horrors, we take a walk on the scary side of BC mushrooms. So on the dunes outside of Tofino and Ucluelet, we sometimes find the 10-line June beetles parasitized by a cordyceps type fungus. The fungus starts eating the beetles, then it directs the beetles to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do, mostly crawling into wide open places, like the top of the dunes. And then when the fungus has forced the beetle to move to where the fungus wants the beetle to be, it finishes eating the fungus, kills it, and in this case, fruits through its eye sockets. So if you look at the 2 jointed items that look like legs with knees on the left-hand side here. That's the fungus fruiting through the eye septs of the eye sockets of the recently killed June beetle. Most people find this quite frightening. The people who sent us reports on this actually had quite a good time with these beetles parasitized by the Ophiocordyceps, the zombie beetles, as you were. This is also a well-known, a number of species of cordyceps are widely employed as aphrodisiacs. So they may be considering the use of this as aphrodisiacs as well. So in addition to the essays, we lightened the mood by including stories, quips, and factoids. We very much thank the BC Museum Press for letting these through the copy editing process. And they're not indicated in any way in the text, but you'll bump into them if you're reading through the book. So you'll find a cameo appearance by a Sasquatch. I haven't written a book yet that doesn't have Sasquatch in it. A mycologist in need of a name shave. A mushroom that ends like a rainbow in a pot of gold. The winner of the world's ugliest mushroom award. Aunt Ettie's quest to save the morals of the housemaids. Arthur Conan Doyle's foul pustules. And the only mycologist to die from mushroom poisoning. Kem.
Okay. There is a research side to this book. We had to interact a lot with current mycological research. The question came up when we started this book, when is a good time to write a mushroom guide? And we realized that for the last 20 years, the answer has always been not yet. Molecular studies of mushroom species have been roiling the taxonomic waters and changing so much of what we know about how we classify mushrooms. Until the late 1990s, all studies of mushroom taxonomy were based on morphology, macro and micro morphology, with input from a few mating studies and chemical analyses. Today, in contrast, it's probably not possible to publish a major taxonomic study of mushrooms without also doing DNA analysis. Producing a mushroom guide that makes use of current research then means that there will be a lot of name changes, and the guide will quickly fall out of date if not updated. And it also means that some of our mushrooms are not going to be able to be pegged to exact species. When space allowed, we tried to call attention to the state of current research in our comments section. I wrote eloquent descriptions of these, which Andy edited down to one sentence. But it was good that he did, because only so much can be done in a beginner's guide. And we had to leave a lot of that out, but we tried to include some of it. So just to show you what we went through, let's take a look at some recent name changes included in the book. The blue chanterelle, for example, you'll find it listed as Polyozelus multiplex, but we now know that that's an umbrella concept for at least 5 distinct species. The common BC russulas with red caps and red flushes on the stem, cream gills, yellowish spore prints, and peppery tastes have gone by many different names, but they're all European names. And work by Anna Bazzicallupo a few years ago helped to sort out some of these. And we came up with a new name in 2017, and this is what we use in the book, Russula rhodocephala. The witch's hat, which we found today, and we should find on our walks tomorrow, Hygrossa biconica, we've always called this, but one of them turns out to be mainly known from Western North America, and is very likely the one we're seeing out there. That's our name of choice. Genetic studies in the 2010s split off some genera from others, and so Hygrophorus has been multiply divided, and Gliophorus is one of the new sections. So the parrot waxy cap is now Gliophorus cetacinus. The red-cracked bolete, Boletus chrysanteron, was moved from its home in Xerocamelus about 12 years ago, but that's a European group, and one of them in that group, Xerocamelus diffractus, is from Western North America and is very likely what we're seeing out there. Hydnum repandum, our hedgehog, our big hedgehog. We're giving it the name now, Hydnum washingtonianum. And we think that some of our large hedgehogs, at least, are this. They are not Hydnum repandum. That's never been found here. Our most common BC conch is the red-belted conch. We called it for years Fomitopsis panicula. Now we've had to divide that up, and you'll probably, the conchs you see out there are one of two. They're either Fomitopsis mountsii, which is on the right, or Fomitopsis ochrystia. There's some other name changes in the book, and I'm not going to go over these, but just to give you an idea of the problems in this, when Noah Siegel published his book on the mushrooms of the Redwood Coast a few years ago, he said he started a stopwatch when he published it. He wanted to know how long it would be before one of the names was wrong, and he made it through 4 months. We didn't even make it that far. You see the ones that have asterisks there? We called this mushroom that used to be called Gymnopus perinatus. We called it by the new name, Marasmiellus perinatus. But a new study came out just this year, and it's very likely going to end up as Calibiopsis. We committed ourselves also to producing a common name for each of our main entry species. And this is a difference. Many mushroom books have some common names in them, but we wanted everyone that was featured as the main entry to have a common name. The British Mycological Society has a long-term project to find English names for all fungi. And there's been a lot of talk about us doing it here, but nothing has ever come of that. So we were forced to make up a few names. Common names of mushrooms are often funny, and for good reason. It helps us to remember them, like who can forget Cowboy's handkerchief for the super slimy Hygrophorus and white Ebernius, or the stinker for the odorous Tricholoma sulphureum group. So we tried to make some of the fabricated common names funny. The new Russula rhidocephala, for example, we called Red Hot Russula. I believe Andy had suggested Hot Redhead, but I nixed that. Yeah, well, why? What we go through. Hypsigus tessellatus turned out not to have a common name, and it grows on poplar trees, so we called it the hip pop. Leucopaxillus gentianus became, you can see it there on the right, it looks exactly like a flapjack, a mushroom, a pancake, so we called it the pancake mushroom. Andy.
A little bit more sit back and enjoy the photos this time for the non-guild species. So about 40% of the main entries in the book are not guild or veined mushrooms. We break them down the same way a program like Mycomatch breaks them down into clubs, corals, jellies, boletes, and so forth. Here's a photo that I wanted to make the front cover of the book, and the museum thought that everybody would think it was a children's guide to mushrooms, which I hope it is. And so they turned me down. So Abigail, with her Erysium, her bear's head, is now on the back cover. Richard Mabley's defining photo of king bolete, showing the beautiful reticulations or the network of raised ridges on the stems. Aspen Skaver stalks, again, Kit Skates Barnhart, throwing in an aspen tree in the background, showing the host of this species, and nicely showing the scabers or the little black markings on the stem. The bear's head, photographed by Daryl Thompson. Hi, Daryl. I hope you're listening here tonight. Erysium Eranasios. This is one, another common name that I think we should have used maybe is Frozen Waterfall, which is a great name for this mushroom. This is one that grows very high in trees, and Daryl is one of our tallest photographers. So that works well. The Purple Fairy Club by Richard Morrison. The Flat Top Candy Club by Michael Bugh, who's also got a fun new book out. This is one of the few mushrooms that grows around Whistler that would be good in dessert rather than as a main course at your table. The pink-tipped coral, Romeria botrytis, one of a whole mass of confusing coral mushrooms. We'll find a number of them tomorrow. The Truffle Eater. This is one that we find each year at the Bamfield Fungus Fest. The spherical object at the bottom is the deer truffle, and it's growing below the ground, and growing out of the top of it is the Ascomycete parasite, very similar, well, related to the parasite of the June beetles I showed you earlier, only instead of parasitizing insects, this particular species parasitizes truffles in BC. The red paint fungus, which has been used as a red dye for millennia and has teeth underneath instead of pores or gills. The Western varnished conch, our closest BC relative of Ganoderma lucidum, the Japanese reishi or Chinese lingqi used medicinally. The conifer sulfur shelf, aka chicken of the woods, which I know a number of people around here like to find in the woods and eat, being careful to select the young tender pieces, because like so many of us as it ages, it becomes old, tough, and bitter. Purple jelly drops, Ascocarini sarcoides, again, Daryl Thompson's beautiful photo. The Alpine Jelly Cone by Rich Mabley. And I would ask you to appreciate once again that these fruiting bodies here are between 1 and 2 centimeters tall. So this is a terrific micro photograph. Hardwood Witch's Butter, taken by good buddy Richard Droker from Seattle. The Western Giant Puffball, one of my photos in the book here, known from interior British Columbia, about as far west as the Pemberton Valley, but also putting in an appearance in Metchosin, British Columbia, where Kem and I live. And this is my next door neighbor here, being used as a scale device. The Bull Earth Star, Geastrum saccatum. Eyelash Cup, Scutellinia scutellata, Kent Brothers.
These are quite small, maybe a centimeter across.
Quite right, and you can see why it's called the eyelash cup. It's got the eyelashes, the black hairs around the edges of the cup. The saddle-shaped false morel, Gyromitra infula, again by Tyson Ellers, who's co-author of a mushroom guide to the West Kootenays, which is an excellent guide if you happen to be in that part of the province. The fall western white truffle tuber oregonense, one of the species that forms the basis of a vibrant truffle industry in Oregon and Washington. And then we included a number of fungi that people might run into, but wouldn't necessarily think of mushrooms, like the hexagonal spot here, magnified in the lower right to show the hexagonal nature. And each of the jigsaw piece borders here, the black lines, is where 2 non-compatible colonies of the fungus come together on this Oregon grape leaf. A box of coral fungi in the genus Romeria by Sava Kirstik, showing the rainbow of colors you find in the coral mushrooms. The velvety earth tongue by the same photographer, and the fluted bird's nest, one of half a dozen species of bird's nest that we might find in the forests around here, by James Holco, terrific Victoria photographer and good friend. So just to wrap up, because I think we're at about our 40-minute mark here, I mentioned at the beginning that we have Kem's and my name on the front of the book, but the people who helped put together the book are regional reviewers, section reviewers, essay reviewers, photographers, and others, makes for a very long list of very generous people. There were very few people that we approached and asked to help out who didn't immediately say, how can I help? And so this was a real team effort putting this guide together. I think more than anything else, we learned from doing the book that mycology is never a solo effort, and that it takes a community to raise a book, like this community from Whistler Fungus Among Us in 2013, photo by James Holko, on our Sunday foray, the day after the Mushroom Festival. And with that, I think that's our 40 minutes, and we want to leave a little bit of time for questions or discussion afterwards. So I'll turn it back over to Bob or Christina.
Hi, everyone. As far as I can tell, I don't see any questions. I'm not sure whether anyone else has seen any. While we're waiting for that, may I ask you a question?
I think that's an excellent idea, Bob.
Okay. Is there any purpose in or effect of color in mushrooms, especially the really vivid colors?
That's a really good question.
Yeah. You always hand me the hard ones.
Yeah, well, sure.
Okay. Good question. Yeah, color.
Certainly some of the colors are used as sunscreen.
Yeah.
And so it's been well documented that there are some species that are much more heavily pigmented in alpine locations. So
yeah, that's but you can't apply what we know about plants, can you, really? Because the colors there are often to cooperate with insect communities. I don't know that happens that much with mushrooms. I think some colors, just that what they call the panda's thumb problem. The colors come along with other characteristics when the genetic change happen, and they aren't necessarily there for the sake of the color themselves.
Well, we seem to be getting a whole bunch of questions now. Thank you very much for answering that. I'm going to follow up on that question with you tomorrow. But Kathy Ramses, pardon me if the pronunciation is wrong, asks, when is the best time to go mushroom picking?
I would say it depends on which mushroom you're interested in. An awful lot of mushrooms fruit in the autumn, and that's when most of our mushroom festivals and mushroom courses take place. But there are mushrooms that fruit specifically in the springtime. There are mushrooms, some species, a lot of the small decomposer fungi that will fruit any time of the year when it's moist enough. So I would say identify the mushrooms you're interested in. For a lot of the mushrooms that people like to forage for around the Whistler area, certainly it's autumn.
This just leads right into it. Margie Krause asks, does your book cover which species are edible?
Oh, yes, indeed. There is a separate edibility section in each description. And some of them we specify as choice, some as edible. And of course, we specify the poisonous mushrooms too. A lot of mushrooms, of course, aren't edible or poisonous. And there's an amazing number of mushrooms that we really don't know whether they are or aren't. And there are volunteers out there that would like to try these. They can contact us.
Do you have any comments on the sunny side up mushroom?
I love the sunny side up. It looks like a fried egg. Do we have it here around Whistler?
Yes, it's on the list.
Okay, we certainly have it where we are, and it's a joy to see this every year, especially when it gets a little older and then it gets that yellow center and looks just like somebody fried an egg sunny side up.
It's also a great relief from the vast majority of small brown mushrooms that usually accompany it that we have little hope of identifying, and then you'll find a sunny side up and at least be able to identify that one.
Well, so Kathy again has a question, and do you have any suggestions for cooking or preparing mushrooms? And if I can put in a plug, Kathy, for next year, we normally have Bruce Warden has been doing a cooking show for the past number of years, a great cooking show. Offer Buckman did one before that, and others. And we hope to bring that back next year, and hopefully you can join and actually watch and learn and taste the results. But I'm not sure whether you gentlemen would like to comment on that as well.
we deliberately avoided recipes and things like that, which are a component of the previous museum guide, simply because of the space available. But there's lots of good mushroom cookbooks out there. One of my favorites, in part because it's by a BC author, is by Bill Jones of Deerholm Farm on Vancouver Island. And he's got a book on cooking with wild mushrooms, which has got a lot of really good practical advice in it.
Well, two more questions, if I may. And actually, I see three, which are the third one is exactly the same as the second one. So I'll start with the first, which is, I think, a very good one, which is there an etiquette to mushroom foraging?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Did you want to?
Yeah, by the way, you don't see the video of us now, but that's because we need to plug something in, but you can hear us and we can see you. What was the question?
The question was about an etiquette for mushroom foraging.
Yes.
If I may just add, Anne was, her main concern was she saw hundreds of people in Golden Ears Provincial Park, and I think she was worried that they were damaging the ecosystem.
Well, I think it starts right at the very top, checking the ownership and management of the piece of land. So a lot of protected areas prohibit mushroom picking, and yet people go and pick in those areas. And we need some areas that are free from mushroom picking to allow the mushrooms to complete their lifestyles there. Aside from that, a lot of it is about sustainability and, never cleaning out an area, but always leaving some mushroom caps there to produce spores, because that's the function of the mushrooms, is to produce spores so that more mushrooms can grow in that area in time. Also, I know I've just returned. I was last week at the Rain Coast Education Society in Tofino, and they've closed some of the back roads there because the mushroom hunters, sometimes commercial mushroom hunters, just leave an ungodly mess in the woods. And so the same sort of provisos that apply to any outdoor activity apply, of course, to mushroom gathering. You should always leave a place better than what it was when you went there. And certainly that's not the case in some areas where people have been foraging for wild mushrooms.
So maybe we can close off the questions for now and maybe come back. Jared has an excellent question on mycorrhizal relations. Brandon Green wanted to just complimented your book on how beautiful and well-timed it is for him. And but the main question to leave you with right now is for Andy, and from two people, and they want to know where you got your mushroom shirt.
Well, I got it from a box on my birthday. And I can tell you no more, but it occupies a place in a closet that has probably at least 12.5 mushroom shirts in it.
Are you wearing your mushroom underpants today?
I don't know that we need to discuss that. I will wear my mushroom underpants on the forays tomorrow, though.
It'll cost you money if you want to see them.
Okay, well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Hopefully we can get back to you again. That was really great. And I have read the book cover to cover, and it's really, really an excellent, I was going to say tome. No, beautiful book. There is so much information in there, definitely worth reading over and over. And thank you again. So now we have the pleasure to introduce our next speaker. He claims to be better looking than the previous speakers, and I'll leave you to judge that. Thom O'Dell is another long time of our guru at Fungus Among Us. He also has graced our BioBlitz events. He's got decades of experience collecting, studying, growing, and eating mushrooms, and he's also cultivates and grows hazelnuts in the Courtenay Valley. Thom has a PhD in botany and loves teaching people about mushrooms and fungi, and we're sure you're going to really enjoy his presentation. Take it away there, Thom. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Well, it's a pleasure to be back in Whistler. I want to thank the organizers for their hard work putting together such a fantastic event. And I'm really pleased to be here once again. And I guess I'll just jump into it because Bob gave me my introduction. Tonight, I want to talk about mushrooms and mental health. And I want to start off by saying a couple of things about my approach. First of all, I'm not an MD. I'm a real doctor. I have a PhD in botany. So I'm a scientist and not a doctor. And I'm not advising anyone to necessarily use mushrooms to treat anything right now. But I wanted to give you, there's a lot of buzz right now about medicinal applications of mushrooms. And I did a little bit of a literature review, and I wanted to share some of that with you. And the lens that I bring to this is a scientist. And so it's not that if I emphasize really rigorous standards of proof, it's not that I think that a mushroom doesn't have an effect if it's not proven, it's that we don't know. So I'll just leave it at that. Are we getting, there we go, thank you. So mushrooms and mental health. Well, what could make one happier than taking a walk in the woods and finding something like this? Personally, I'm fortunate that I'm a pluviophile, one who gets energy from rainy days. So the fall in the Pacific Northwest is like magic for me. And one of the main things one can do if one is suffering from depression is spend time outdoors and doing something physical, like walking through the woods and admiring the beauty of the spectacular variety of fungi and mushrooms that we have in this part of the world. Now, getting back to the more direct medicinal applications, I'll say that human use of mushrooms and fungi as medicine probably goes back thousands of years. As Andy pointed out, Otzi the Iceman was found with these polypores as one of several fungi in his kit. I don't think we know for certain what he was doing with these, but over time, this species had a reputation as a astringent and a good something to apply to skin conditions that might help make them better. Of course, the Asian pharmacopoeia is loaded with mushrooms and fungi of all sorts, and this is found in their iconography. This is a very common theme of a sage or a wise man with a species of Ganoderma, which is sometimes called the mushroom of immortality. Western medicine has been slower to adopt mushrooms as medicine. And if we want to go into some of the reasons for that in more detail, we could do that on our walk tomorrow. Of course, the discovery by Fleming of the antibiotic properties of penicillin put to rest any doubt about fungi as medicine. But of course, this is a microfungus, not a mushroom. Just as a reminder, all mushrooms are fungi, but only some fungi have mushrooms. They're estimated to be between 1 and many millions of species of fungi, and only a small portion of those, 20,000 probably at most, are mushroom-forming species. So they're a minute fraction of a percent. Most fungi are microscopic molds that are found in and on plants and in soil. So getting back to mushrooms, and I'm focusing on mushrooms for the rest of the talk tonight. Some of the things that they've been alleged to help with include infections, suppressing the immune response. There actually are prescription drugs based on fungi that allow you to keep a transplanted organ without your body rejecting it. There's a lot of preliminary research on anti-cancer properties of mushrooms, mostly, I would say, laboratory petri dish or mouse type studies. I'm not aware of any human trials on anti-cancer properties. And any number of other ailments have been If you look in herbals or particularly the Asian pharmacopoeia, you will find a lot of different uses of mushrooms in medical applications. But tonight I want to focus on some of this newer research that has to do with mental health, dementia, depression, addiction, etc. And with an aging population, of course, dementia and Alzheimer's are on the mind of many of us. And I know I personally have had several relatives die from Alzheimer's, so it's really close to home for me. Some of the species or genera that have been found or reputed to have medicinal effects include those shown here. All of these genera occur in the Pacific Northwest, perhaps with the exception of Lentinus, but I think it's here too. In any case, maybe not exactly the same species they're using in Asia, but there are close relatives. And the ones I'm going to talk about the most are Erysium and psilocybe. And we'll get to that, more about that in a minute. If you start Googling mushrooms and medicine, any number of websites will show you pages like this, which have handy tables with different species of mushrooms and their potential medicinal effects. Usually they have disclaimers that you're not supposed to use this as a treatment of any specific disease, etc. Now, you'll find in almost every case that the immunomodulatory or immune stimulating effects go across the board. And the reason is simple. The cell walls of mushrooms have these complex polysaccharides called beta glucans. Beta glucans, at least some of the ones that mushrooms produce, stimulate white blood cell formation, which is part of your immune response. Is this a good thing? Well, maybe if your immune system is weakened, it's a good thing. If you have a healthy immune system, do you want to be boosting your white blood cell count? Well, I'm not a doctor, but I'm a little skeptical of the notion that a healthy immune system needs constant boosting. Now, a few weeks ago, a friend of mine sent me this picture of an extract that she's taking because she's concerned about potential memory loss and onset of dementia and so forth, and wants to delay it. And so this is part of what inspired me to delve into this a little more. And this is a preparation made from lion's mane mushroom, or Erysium Eranasios. And it's going to become your best study buddy. So if you add it to your coffee, smoothies, etc., you'll get productive, is what it says. I'll just note that these are rather ambiguous claims that are being made for a product, but I started delving in, and I'll go into more detail on the lion's mane in a minute. One of the first things I found when I started doing a little bit of a literature review was this review from Fungal Biology from 2016. The author has claimed that there's no scientific evidence supporting the use of mushroom extracts in the treatment of disease. Claims about miraculous properties should be evaluated critically, and nonetheless, we should have a major investment in clinical trials to develop mushrooms as medicine. And there are many compounds in mushrooms that might have useful pharmacological properties. Well, Sturgeon's law, how many of you have heard of this? That's 90% of everything is crap. And that doesn't mean that using mushrooms as medicine is crap. It means that some of what you read about it is. And so again, the lens I'm going to bring to this is some recent clinical trials with human subjects. This is kind of the gold standard in terms of Western medicine. If we can do experiments where we use humans, hopefully large numbers of them, in a double blind, that is, neither the person giving the treatment or the one receiving it knows whether they got the treatment or the placebo, then we are entering into the area, hopefully, of not crap. And I'll give you a few examples of that. First with Erysium Eranasios, which is shown here. And lots of claims are being made for this as aiding in memory and potentially preventing the loss thereof and onset of dementia. And so here's a study. This was a mouse study. And I'm going to try to give you a little bit of context on each of these papers. How recent is it? How many subjects were included? And what were the effects that were actually being measured? So in this case, they had 14 mice. Half of them got a placebo and half got the mushroom. In this case, I believe it was actually a fresh or dried mushroom. Now, they had some way of observing the mice and telling whether their memory was improved or not. And by this evaluation, which I'm not familiar with the methodology, I'm a mycologist, I'm not a neurobiologist. They seem to think that the mice were showing improved memory. Well, that's good. But they also, being good experimental biologists, they extracted the brains of these mice and looked at the neurons, and they found 2 to 3 times more new neuron development in the mice that got Erysium. So that's pretty suggestive. Small sample size, I would say, but still suggestive. Then here's a study where they used the same species. This was a 3-month study, and they had 15 people in each treatment. And again, it's pretty recent. And they found higher scores on the mini mental state examination. So that's supposed to evaluate your cognitive function. And again, moderate sample sizes, but it was a double-blind and placebo-controlled study, so that's pretty good. And then I think the final one for the Erysium was this very intriguing study out of Japan. They gave people twice a day a gram of Erysium Eranasios plus one of the compounds from the mushroom. They enriched the mushroom pill with the Eranacine, and they had 20 people in each treatment. And after almost a year of doing this, they found a decrease in cognitive abilities of those who got the placebo and an improvement in a different test in the people who got the mushroom. So, excuse me. So in this case, we had a slightly larger group, and we had a longer study, and we have both the decline of mental function in those who got the placebo and an increase in function in those who got the mushroom. Again, fairly suggestive of potential effects. This is the most recent I could find, and it's also the largest group for this treatment that I've seen yet. And of course, to do a good job with this kind of research, we need to start seeing much larger numbers of people being treated over longer periods of time, because this sort of mental decline, it can take many years to see how your mental acuity changes. But it's a good start. Now, I wanted to get to another point of why 90% of everything might be crap. And in this case, it's the actual preparation of these various mushroom extracts, or so-called mushroom extracts. I don't think there's much regulation, and there needs to be more, about what you can call a mushroom powder. And maybe this was just ground up mushrooms, but in some cases, people are growing mycelium on grain and then grinding up the whole gamish. And then you get a lot of starches and other materials. First of all, the mycelium itself may not produce that much of the compounds of interest. There's some evidence of that for Ganoderma. If you go to the NAMX website of Jeff Chilton, he's got a very nice white paper from his company where they showed that Ganoderma fruit bodies have a lot more of the compounds of interest than the mycelium. And then secondly, if you're grinding up a mycelium and grain mixture, well, there's a lot of grain in there, and that is not going to have these compounds. So it's a question. I'm not saying that in every case the mycelium wouldn't be effective. Maybe in some cases it's just as effective, but it's one of those things that needs to be included in a program of research on this topic. And then another point I wanted to make, Erysium Eranasios, it does occur in BC, although it's quite rare. At least I think it's rare. It's rarely collected. I haven't seen it myself here. And we have 3 other species of Erysium in British Columbia. Now, Erysium Eranasios is shown here. So does Erysium Eranasios have these compounds of interest? First of all, I don't think we know what all the compounds are, but some of them have potentially been identified. And I'm not aware of any effort to look at the native species in BC to see whether they have more or less, any or none of the compounds of interest. So we could be overlooking some things in our backyard. And the habitat for Erysium Eranasios happens to be old growth forests. It mostly fruits off of old fir logs, large diameter. So if we want to protect this natural pharmacopoeia, we need to do a better job of protecting our ancient forests. So shifting gears a little bit, and I feel in some ways I'm paralleling a few little bits out of Andy's talk, because he talked about medicinal effects of Erysium, and now we're talking about psilocybe. The history of use of psilocybes probably goes back thousands of years in Mesoamerica, and the earliest visits or invasions by the Spanish, they did see use of magic mushrooms, which they did their best to eradicate by highly violent means, including destroying probably thousands of these mushroom stones, as well as, of course, killing people who were using them. Then in the 1950s, they were introduced to the West through efforts of Gordon Wasson and others. And there was an era of research on the potential psychiatric effects of psilocybin between 1957 and maybe 1970. But alongside of this was the introduction to the popular culture of LSD and psilocybin and other substances, which were part of what I would term a cultural revolution. And this was so unsettling to people that the mushrooms and other substances were banned. By 1973, I think it was, psilocybin was banned in BC. LSD was made illegal in the US in 1967. So the door was kind of closed, and there was a major stigma on more research until recently on this topic. We do have a number of species that contain psilocybin in our part of the world. Shown here is the Liberty cap or Psilocybe semelanciata. And psilocybe species have a lot of potential in treating addiction, which is shown, this again, relatively small study. This one had about 10 people. And after 12 months, oh, sorry, I think there were 15 people. After 9 months, 60% were still abstinent from smoking. And I don't know if any of you have tried to quit tobacco, but it's very challenging for many people. So that's pretty exciting. It's also been used in treating alcoholism, and there's a lot of interest in potential for opiate addiction as well. And quite often, the people who get these treatments and other people who have used them in other ways find their experiences quite personally and spiritually meaningful and significant. In this case, here's another study, 14 people per treatment. And these were people who were in terminal or very severe cancer and were experiencing depression and anxiety related to their disease. And what they found was one treatment, or maybe two, with psilocybin increased the people's moods, essentially reduce their depression, reduce their anxiety, and increase their quality of life. So there's a lot of potential for treating of anxiety, PTSD, and for use in hospice. I recommend looking at Fantastic Fungi. There's a section in there about use in hospice of entheogens, and it's very revealing. And then there's also this work on depression, additional work on depression. This was a study, again, a double-blind, placebo-controlled study with either 12 or 15 people, depending on which treatment. And they had, after a month, one session of psilocybin, they had reduced scores on tests for depression. So most people who are using antidepressants, they have to take them every day. So if we can find something that is relatively low risk, because you don't have to take it very often, well, that's pretty encouraging as well. Now, in all cases, there's a lot more research needed, and that's shown here by this study. They compared psilocybin with a commonly used antidepressant, and they didn't find a difference. They found that psilocybin was as effective as the other antidepressant, although there were secondary outcomes that favored psilocybin, one of which, of course, is the lack of need for constant maintenance doses. And again, longer and larger trials are needed to really nail this stuff down and make it more convincing to the medical community. Finally, I would suggest that the greatest pandemic in the world is disconnection from nature. And this was a survey study with almost 1,500 participants, and they found that people who used psychedelics had an increase in pro-environmental behavior, and also incorporation of the natural world, regardless of other personality traits. So maybe the hippies were right. You know, Abbie Hoffman proposed back in 1970 that we should put LSD in the municipal water supplies, and maybe it would have made the first Earth Day more successful. But it's not all good. I would never recommend that people willy-nilly ingest magic mushrooms or any other potentially medical substance without careful study and consideration and preparation. And there are any number of well-documented cases of people going off the rails on psilocybin and other entheogen experiences. So set and setting, which is the idea that your expectations going into an experience and your physical surroundings, as well as how you prepare for it, have a huge impact on the outcome. People who are prone or on the verge of some kind of a psychotic break can easily be pushed over the edge by taking these substances, and it's not a pretty thing. So again, I'm not beating the drum for people to just use this stuff, but I think there's a great potential for medical and other applications. And again, we're still learning about what species occur here. This is a picture of Psilocybe azurescens, I believe, and courtesy of my friend Jim Jacobs. We have, I don't know, between 12 and 14 described species of Psilocybe in the Pacific Northwest. Maybe it's up to 20 by now, but there's almost certainly more out there. There are also, all this work is focused on psilocybin, and they're using synthetic psilocybin. And that's only one of about a half a dozen related compounds that are in these mushrooms. There's psilocin, there's baeocystin, there's norbaeocystin, and there are others. And the others are really getting no pharmacological attention as far as I can tell. So again, the natural world is full of potential medicines, and we need to devote a lot more resources to, one, protecting the habitat where these things occur, and two, investigating how they're best used. And I put this slide in as a reminder to mention that, you know, we talk about these species, and a lot of them, so-called medicinal mushrooms, are cultivated species, and there are particular strains that have been grown and are propagated and fruited, and that only represents a fraction of the diversity within a species. These two petri dishes are the same species of mushroom, and this was a dye decoloration test that I did for remediation screening, and you can see all the petri dishes started off blue, and if the mushroom is making a certain enzyme, then it changes it to more or less light pink. So even within the same species, you can see there's a great variation in the production of certain compounds, and I'm presuming that's the same for all these other compounds of interest. And so, in addition to looking at across species, we also need to look within the species and find the ones that are going to be best for our purposes, or even breed new varieties for the purpose. I've been focusing a bit narrowly on just two aspects of the potential medicinal use of mushrooms, but there are a lot of other potential uses of mushrooms out of our forests. We cultivate maybe a dozen species of mushrooms are widely cultivated in British Columbia, but we have dozens more that have the potential to be domesticated for food. I'm not going to go more into medicine because I've been covering that. Mushrooms are also widespread mutualists of plants. That means they help them in various ways. Some of them are associated with the roots as mycorrhizae, and others are associated with the leaves, and they are presumably doing something. Hasn't been studied well, but they're protecting in part against insect pathogens, or pests, etc. There's a lot more work to do in that realm. Mushrooms are being used as fiber. There's both grow to order custom packaging that's made out of mycelium that's completely biodegradable, compostable packaging that you can grow into whatever shape you want. And there's also this mushroom leather that's being promoted now, and there's a multi-million-dollar developing industry on that. Of course, you saw some pictures of the diversity of dyes that come out of mushrooms. One thing I don't believe that was mentioned when Andy was talking about mushroom dyes, when you get dyes out of plants, they tend to fade in the light relatively easily compared to the petroleum dyes that we're used to. Mushroom dyes are much more light fast than plant dyes. So that's an intriguing area that needs more exploration. Mushrooms can be used to clean up toxic compounds in the soil and elsewhere. And there's a lot of more work to be done in that arena. Everything from DDT, PCBs to dioxins have been shown in at least laboratory settings to be broken down by mushrooms. And I mentioned as mutualists, some of them are presumably protecting against insects, but we also have myco-insecticides that are becoming commercially available. There's also fungi that are used to protect against pathogenic fungi. So the whole realm of plant health and its support by the fungi in the natural world is another arena that our forests are a natural stock warehouse of these organisms that are going to enrich us in many, many ways. And we need, again, if we're going to have these species and all their variation in order to have a more sustainable civilization, we need to protect that habitat. Now, I think we have a few minutes for some questions, and otherwise, if we get out in the woods tomorrow in my happy place, then I'd be happy to answer more questions at that time.
Thanks for that, Thom. We do have one question from Emiliano, and it's what kind of health practitioners work with mushrooms for medicinal uses?
I would say that the ones who are using mushrooms the most are probably those trained in traditional Asian medicine.
Right. Well, maybe anyone else interested more in what Thom was talking about, which is, of course, very topical these days. Thom is leading a walk tomorrow, and I'm sure would be very interested to answer your questions then. And we may have some time at the end of this presentation as well to for you to ask more questions. I'm going to pass it over to Christina now. Thanks again, Thom. That really was great. I always love listening to you. Pass you over to Christina now for the photo show.
Thank you so much. So now, yeah, the last part of the presentation today is the photo show. Last year we did it for the first time during COVID, just to help have people a reason to go outside, and we thought it worked really, really well. So even more people submitted photos this time. We had over 180 photos, and they were so fantastic. I really enjoyed seeing all of them, and I was even more enjoyed that I didn't have to be the judge because it would be way too hard. We had 5 categories: captivating color, weird and wonderful, gorgeous gills, tiny toadstools, and fungal fun. So something that had a person in it or some other way to make it fun. And then the judges will pick the winners in each category. The prizes are either a gift certificate to the Whistler Bite Co., $50 for a minor tune, and a mushroom book. And another one is a $50 gift certificate to Nesters, plus plus a mushroom book. And which mushroom book will they be winning, do you ask? Well, of course, it'll be Kem and Andy's New Mushrooms of BC book. We also have draw prizes for anyone who submitted a photo in all 5 categories, and they'll win a mushroom cap. So the judges that have this all in very good hands. The first one is Joern Rohde. So he's been in the Sea to Sky corridor for more than 25 years. You've seen his photos. He's been to more local events than probably any other photographer. And he's also co-owner and publisher of Whistler Traveler magazine. And with him presenting the results is Andy Dietrich. He's also an award-winning photographer. He's so much experience with Discovery Channel, Natural Geographic, Animal Planet, BBC. The list goes on and on. So we thank both of these guys for being the judges, and please take it from here.
All right, Christina, thank you very much. Unfortunately, after the judging, Andy has had to depart for another appointment. So it's down to me for making the announcements of what we have decided for the winners of the competition. Would like to thank everybody for their submissions. It's never easy judging a photo contest. There are some great photos submitted this year, and without further ado, let's get right into it. Going into captivating color. And I think, do we have Andy MacKinnon handy to?
Hi, Joern. Yes,
there he is.
I don't have my video, but I'm happy to leap in with comments on any of the mushrooms.
We can see them. We're just not online.
I can hear you, Andy and Kem. So excuse my head going back and forth. I'm working on the images on my other monitor. So Andy, do you want to go ahead with what this first one is? This is our 3rd place finisher in captivating color.
Sure. This looks like a very young version of Calicera Cornea, which is a beautiful little gelatinous club fungus which grows on wood and is a wood decay fungus, and is not that uncommon around the Whistler area, but it's uncommon to find it at this. Oh, Kem,
Sorry,
I got. Okay, sorry, getting a bit of a feedback here, but it's unusual to find it at this very young stage. And so it's a beautiful photo by the contributor.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we picked it, was it was so unusual, and of course the vibrant color. Moving on to 2nd place finisher, Joanna. Is Joanna Aldred with this beautiful violet mushroom, which comes into the common name as well as the scientific name. Go ahead and with that, Andy.
Well, we're actually not quite sure which mushroom this is, Joern. It is in all likelihood a species of Cortenarius, just getting started out in life. And there are a lot of beautiful purple Cortenarius, but since this is a a category based primarily on color, it's a fabulous photo for that, because Cortenarius does purple better than just about any genus of organisms, plant, animal, or fungal. And so this is just a lovely photo. You can tell.
Hold on. Go ahead.
You can tell that this is a photo of a beautiful photo of a very small fungus by the size of the moss that's around us. So a great contribution by this photographer.
Yes, thank you very much, Joanna. And then we'll move on to first place finisher in this category. Is Magali Lalonde Lego. And I think Andy had this picture or this actual mushroom in one of his book photos.
Oh, absolutely. This is Hygrocebi miniata, and both the color with the yellow edge and the roughened surface are characteristic of this very small mushroom. And I was complimenting photographers earlier on having such magnificent photos of such very tiny mushrooms. And this is one that, Kem, would you say is maybe 5 centimeters tall, maybe a bit more?
Yeah. And the timing on this is interesting because when this mushroom first comes up, it's usually all red and it gradually gets more yellow as it goes along. So this photographer has caught this in a transition period.
So a terrific photograph, Joern.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I'm just going to stop the share for a second here while I move on to my next folder of images. And we're moving on to the weird and wonderful. And let's restart that. All right, this is our third place finisher is Tabitha Dorland Barlow.
This is the carbon antlers or candle snuff fungus, Xylaria hypoxylon, and the white upper surface there is all covered with asexual spores or conidia. And if you were to imagine reaching out with your finger and pronging those antlers, you would see a cloud of white spores come up from them. From the black base, it looks knobbly enough that I think it's making its sexual spores in the lower portions as well. And this is a common wood decay fungus around Whistler.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's got great contrast to the background. And sort of the theme for Halloween coming up, I think. Did it again. In second place, we have Wendy Rogers with this specimen of a russula, I believe.
Very good, Joern. Yes, yeah, absolutely. A russula from the chalk white stem, the attached white gills, the pale spore print, and something we see sometimes on russula, which is the growth of a second cap out of the first cap, which I'm assuming is why this ended up in weird and wonderful. Just a lovely little photograph of quite an unusual mushroom. Kem.
Yeah, if you would do this, the taste test on this, just taste a bit and spit it out. This mushroom very likely would be peppery.
All right. Yeah, no, it's gorgeous. And I haven't seen one like this, and I've been in the forest quite often looking. Yeah, it's just very unique. And we did have a fair number of submissions in Weird and Wonderful, and it was really difficult to narrow down our favorites. But the first place finisher, we were all sort of we were all unanimous on this, and again, it's Magali Lalonde Lego as a photographer with this gorgeous specimen.
And that is a very strange specimen indeed. That is a species of Lacaria. It's likely Lacaria lacata, but it's difficult to say. They're called the deceiver mushrooms, and because they can be so variable, and they're one of the small number of local mushrooms that commonly turn themselves inside out like this, which is why it's so weird and wonderful. It's a common mycorrhizal mushroom, and not uncommonly turns itself inside out like this.
Yeah,
Kem?
it would have been originally sort of curved, and then it would have been flat. And then if you can just think of the edges, keep turning up. And as they keep turning up, the gills are exposed, and then they start spreading apart. And that's why you get this strange look. You see this quite often with this mushroom. There are others that sort of invert themselves, but this one really does it often.
Yeah, it almost could have been in our next category. And so I'm just going to stop the share here while I switch to the next folder. And our next winner, or next, this is third place in the gorgeous gills, is Michael Rivera with this blue chanterelle. And aside from the fingers, we really love the perfection on the gills on this. This is just a gorgeous sample, and you might have done better without the fingers in there, Michael.
We would call these veins rather than gills because they're fat on the leading edge, shallow from top to bottom, and they branch and anastomose or come together. All the same, whether you call them gills or veins, I would love to have this cooked up properly and served with pasta on a plate in front of me. This is for those who have been with us for the evening, a really good example of how scientific names have changed. So the blue chanterelles, we used to call them all Poliozellis multiplex. Now we suspect that none of them are Poliozellis multiplex. This looks a lot like what we would call Poliozellis atroazulinus. None of that affects how fabulous that would taste on your pasta, but where it's now probably one of 3 or 4 species that we have in British Columbia, and it's going to take a few years to sort out exactly which blue chanterelle we have.
We don't find this very much where Andy and I live down on the southern end of the island. It's more common up here, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I find them semi-regularly. My patch this season did not show up, or somebody else got there before me.
It's also been found, I think, an awful lot during the Vancouver Mycological Society's annual forays in Manning Park.
Yes.
So it's more of an interior species than a coastal species. A beautiful photograph. I agree. It's you know, it just shows the species very, very nicely. A great choice.
Yeah. Gills are not withstanding. Moving on to second place, we have Lisa Severn with this gorgeous. I love the backlight on this, and a little more interest in the way the gills are formed on this.
Sure, we've got no clue what this is. I'm guessing that some of the cross linkages we see on the gills here are from another fungus that is attacking this first fungus. So it's very difficult to say what species this is.
It looks to me like there's frost in there.
There is frost in there too. I think there's a lot going on in this photo, which may have been why you selected it as a winning photo. But I think there is a mushroom with frost and probably some fungus on fungus action, I would say, on the photo.
Yeah, that's our second place one, and coming into our first place, again, this gorgeous backlit, and you know, somebody's crawling on their belly to get this photo. This is Aurora Moore's photo, and this is first place in Gorgeous Gills.
Right. So this is a common fungus on wood around here. This is Xeromphalina campanella, which is called what?
Oh,
Fuzzy foot.
fuzzy,
Fuzzy foot.
fuzzy foot, is it? Okay. We have to look it up in our book.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not sure of the common name, but it's one that we find on wood a lot around here. And as you say, someone has really got down on their belly to shoot this one from the ground up, because this is growing on a vertical log.
When I take kids out, I call this the pumpkin mushroom, because it comes up right around Halloween and it has sort of a pumpkin color on the cap.
Yeah, that's it. So,
But I think a well-deserved victory in this category
Yeah.
for this particular mushroom.
yeah, there's work that went into it. We can see that. All right, and let's move on to tiny toadstools. And these ones, where did we go here? This is our third place winner, Wendy Rogers, with this, again, great contrast with the lichen right beside it. And I've taken many photos of these little guys, and they're everywhere. Go ahead, Andy.
No, this is Mycenas strobelinoides, and it's very common here in Whistler, and I hardly ever see it down on our end of the island. There are several of these Mycenas and used to be Mycenas that are colorful like this. Some are pink, some are red, some are orange, and this is one of those of that group.
And most of them are not Mycenas anymore.
This one is, I think.
It is,
Yeah,
yes.
mhm.
But the pink ones and a lot of the yellow ones are not.
That's right.
But a terrific photo. And again, just a note that people should have a look at the size of the mosses and the lichens here to appreciate that this is a mushroom of 3 or 4 centimeters height maximum. So a great photo.
Mhm.
Yeah. And this next one, this contributor has some other great images, and this one came into second place. Great with the sunlight streaming through the background. Nice overall light and backlight on this little guy. Little droplets of water coming off the moss there as well.
There are a large number of Mycena species, probably 300 species in BC, I would imagine, that are all important decomposer mushrooms in our forest ecosystems. So this is a species of Mycena. Not sure which species it is, but the fungus is growing in the soil there, decomposing organic materials, turning them back into soil, recycling. And they're critically important in our forest ecosystems. And they make these beautiful little bonnet fruiting bodies. So a species of Mycena, and a really nice photo.
Mycenas are sometimes called bonnets colloquially.
Yeah. All right. And that leaves us on with coming into first place. And this guy is really tiny. This gorgeous little photo. And again, you really have to be paying attention when you're in the forest to see these guys. You can see the little seed heads from the moss, sphagnum moss there popping up beside it. This photo is by Liz Barrett.
Not sure what that is, but yeah.
We think a species of Mycena, perhaps. You would need to look at microscopic characters, spore color, and other things like that. But it's fun for me because that mushroom is as tall as the spore capsules from the bryophytes, from the mosses next to it.
Yeah.
Which indicates that the mushroom is probably maximum 2 centimeters tall.
Yeah.
Beautiful little fairy bonnet.
Yeah, really, really tight depth of field, focus right on, and that's really difficult to get that focus on something that small. Which moves us on to our final category, which is fun with fungi. And we had, I had so many that I wanted to put into winners categories. We actually ended up with two in third place. This gorgeous Erysium here from Yufumi Nijima. She's obviously having fun with this fungi. And she's just harvested out, looks off the log in the background, I'm guessing. Go ahead.
Well, I would say a beautiful woman with a beautiful fungus. And that's one of our choicest edibles. And it's no wonder she's so happy. And I think we should try and figure out exactly where that is so that we can go back next year.
They're still popping. There's a good chance we'll find some on Sunday.
Excellent.
I found a 3.5 kilo one last weekend, so they are out there and prolific at the moment.
Yeah, send us the GPS location.
Yeah. And in the tied for third, Kelly Talman Longden had some nice other submissions as well, and she had a winner last year as well, I believe. Put a little bit of work into this one. Fun, a little bit of fun with this fly agaricus, and there's a couple little babies coming up beside it, and some potted mushrooms as well.
There's a lot going on in that photo. It's a work of art.
That's where the fairies live that make fairy rings, right?
Yeah,
almost certainly. Yeah. So that's the world's most famous mushroom. Of course, as you said, Joern, the fly agaric. That's the Super Mario mushroom. That's the Allison Wonderland mushroom. That's the mushroom, as Kem says, if you ask a group of school kids to draw a mushroom, about half of them will draw this one.
Yeah.
And it's for me, it's fun because it's really one of the most beautiful mushrooms, I think, that exists. And it's absolutely common around Whistler some seasons. You know, so it's odd that something quite that beautiful is quite that abundant, though I don't often see it with the little china jars under it.
You know, this could be the solution to the high cost of housing in Whistler.
Yeah.
If you're really, really short, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank all of those that did submit photos of this particular species. There were quite a few. This was definitely the most common submission, and there were some great images. There's just too many of them, sorry. And then moving on to second place. This one's got me a little bit stumped. I've got a rough idea what it is, but they're definitely having fun with this one.
We know what that is. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
These are, there's a mushroom that is called Phallus imputicus. And if you sort of parse that out, you'll kind of guess what it's about. And when it comes up, it looks a lot like a human reproductive organ.
A male human reproductive organ.
And anyway, when it initially, just before it pops out of the ground, and it can pop out of the ground in a single day, it exists in a form we call an egg, just at the surface of the ground or just under the ground. And at this stage, it is edible. Tastes like chicken. I don't know. Yeah,
Oh, have you
but-
had it?
yeah, but no, we
Bullshit.
don't know what it tastes like. But
Yeah.
but if you slice it in half, you can see it's getting ready to pop up. And this is what the person has done. She sliced it.
Yeah, and very well done. It's a good slice and a lot of fun with that.
I think so.
Which brings us to our final finalist. And this one was, again, unanimous. And this is actually my favorite photo of the entire competition. This was Adam Smith. I'm going to guess it's a daughter. It speaks for itself. I don't need to say anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not going to say anything about it either. We saw this photo and just thought, that's so wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. You're missing a whole side of mushrooms if you don't go out looking for mushrooms with kids and see it through their eyes. And this is beautiful.
Yeah, and just stand by while where did we go here? Well, there we are. I'm just going to stop my share for a second while I find the winners of the baseball caps for those that submitted photos to all of the categories. There it is. All right. And I'm going to, while I announce this, I'm just going to put that photo back up again because just why not? It's so good. All right. And again, for those that submitted images to each of the categories, the draw prize is, now I'm gonna actually stop the share and show the prize. I found mine. It's this lovely Fungus Among Us cap. And I'm the proud owner of one of these. Which way's crooked? So the winners of these are Dan Raymond, Elaine Verrier, and Max Tyndall, who is 8 years old. Loved his images and a little more work, and you can place put some of his images maybe into third, second, or first place next year. He can, if he's out tomorrow, he can ask me, and I'm more than happy to help the kids to play with their cameras and take some great photos of mushrooms. All right, that's it for my presentation.
Thank you very, very much, Joern and Andy, the other Andy who had to leave, and also to Andy and Kem for the IDs. But those, the variety and quality of the photos was spectacular again this year. It's a really, we just started that last year, and it's a definitely is a keeper for all of our events in the future. So for any budding photographers, please get out there, hone your skills, and come back again next year.
Yeah, and if you see me out there, never hesitate to ask. I'm always open to helping out.
If he doesn't have a large bear's head in his hands. So just thanks again to everyone who submitted entries. For anyone interested, we will have a full selection of all the submitted photos on or at least as many as we can on our website in the next few days. Before we conclude, by the way, for anyone with questions, I apologize, we are running over. We're trying to finish by 9 at the latest. And if you do have questions, please bring them tomorrow. I'm sure that all the leaders will be more than happy to answer your questions. And before we conclude tonight, Sabrina has an announcement of the Pay As You Can winner.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I have the winner. Thanks to everyone who donated to our event tonight. We really appreciate all of your generosity and support. And tonight's winner is Chris KPO, sorry if I said your last name wrong, I will send you an email to arrange how we'll get the book to you. And congrats again.
Yeah, okay, well, that's congratulations on that. And just a reminder for tomorrow. So anyone who has tickets in advance of the walk, please arrive by 8:30 at the latest. And if you're a Whistler resident, I'm sure you don't need to be reminded that warm waterproof clothing, really warm and really waterproof, would probably be in order. And for anyone who wants to, whether you've bought a ticket or not for the walk, everyone is welcome between 2:30 and 4 o'clock to the outdoor mushroom display at Myrtle Phillip Community School. Sorry, a reminder that you have to be double vaccinated for both and show proof of that. Anyway, so thanks to all the presenters. Thanks to all the other gurus who you didn't see tonight, but you'll meet again tomorrow. Thanks to you for tuning in, and good night, and thanks from all of us at the Whistler Naturalists.